Do you feel as if Robert Mueller was a compelling and truthful witness today?
I don't feel like he was overly compelling. I think when at some point in time there's going to end up being consequences if you continue to overpromise and underperform, which I think my friends on the other side of the aisle in the Judiciary Committee have been doing since I've gotten to Congress in January. He had difficulty understanding questions and had to have things repeated back to him quite a bit. And listen, anybody who testifies for 7 hours in front of Congress, it's a grueling experience. But no, I don't think that this moved the needle in favor of towards where the Democrats wanted it to go at all.
Are you troubled by the Mueller report? Are you troubled by instances, the 10 instances that were singled out of obstructive practices that were outlined? Does that trouble you?
I think whenever you have that much federal resources, I should tell you, Chuck, I was a federal criminal defense attorney for 10 years. So when you expend that amount of federal resources and go into anything, you're always going to have things that are at the very least unflattering. But I think the underlying premise of the entire thing is that we know you can have obstruction without an underlying crime. But you know why it's almost never charged in those situations? Because proving corrupt intent is very difficult. And I think that's what we get through here. And we see a whole lot of instances of the Democrats grabbing onto one potential illegitimate reason for these conduct occurring, but nobody ever seems to talk about the legitimate reasons for why it could have occurred.
Do you at all accept the possibility that the reason he didn't have enough evidence to charge conspiracy is because of the obstruction? I mean, that is not an illogical connective issue.
Yeah, well, it's not an illogical connective, but that's not what the report says. I mean, that is not what Volume 1 says. It says that they did not find evidence of conspiracy from President Trump
enough
or his
to
campaign.
charge. There's a difference. Read the declinations, Congressman. Yeah. There are caveats in there. They did not find enough to bring charges in a prosecution. That doesn't mean they didn't find troubling issues, and it doesn't mean that they thought the law wasn't correctly was a little shaky.
Establishing probable cause when you have $25 million, 19 attorneys, 40 FBI agents in 3 years. I mean, we act like federal prosecutors have been behind the 8 ball in the whole thing. That's just not how federal prosecutions and federal investigations work. And it's sure not how federal prosecutions and investigations work when you have half of the team that has a direct relationship with the opponent of the person you're investigating.
Let me go back to something else, though. How should we feel as American citizens if Mueller was not able to interview one of the principals involved in this entire issue, and that's the President of the United States? Why should we believe this is a completed investigation if he never interviewed the sitting president?
Well, that's a political determination, and that's what we have elections for. There is no investigation of a criminal investigation in any courtroom in the entire country that's required to submit to an interview. That just doesn't occur, and that's what we keep doing. We meld criminal culpability and political gain.
Could have been subpoenaed before the grand jury. He chose not to subpoena him. If you're trying to complete a thorough investigation and you leave off the decision to subpoena, does that not leave that open, that maybe this is an investigation, that there's more information to be gleaned?
Subpoenaing a witness and subpoenaing the subject of a criminal investigation are not the same thing. And this, I mean, we can call this a special counsel's report, we can call it whatever else, but we have 19 federal prosecutors perpetrating a federal criminal investigation on a sitting president of the United States, and that is exactly right. And if you're saying that they didn't issue a subpoena, well, then that's a question for Bob Mueller and his team, not for the president of the United States.
No, I understand that. Do you think, as somebody, as somebody who's been on the defensive side, you said you've been a criminal defense attorney and you've dealt with these things, can you look at that and say that's a complete investigation? Do you feel as if they overturned every stone? You keep throwing stats at me, but there's there's two things that didn't happen. Paul Manafort did not cooperate as a witness. That's number one. So that is a problem, number one. And number two was they never subpoenaed the president.
Well, and they didn't subpoena the president, and I'm not sure if you're the subject of a criminal investigation. I mean, if I'm representing the president and I think I am the actual subject of the investigation, I'm not entirely sure I show up. But this goes back to what my colleague John Ratcliffe said today. You know, my friends on the other side of the aisle kept talking about nobody wants to be above the law, nobody's below the law, but they set a whole different standard of law. I mean, the presumption of innocence and proofs beyond a reasonable doubt is a bedrock of our legal system, and all of a sudden now we are talking about proving exoneration, which is essentially innocence. And the folly of that is in Chairman Nadler's opening statement. I think there were at least 4 double negatives when he asked questions to Bob Mueller right out of the gate. I mean, they were so confusing to follow, I couldn't follow.
How concerned are you about Russian interference?
I'm concerned about Russian interference, and I think we should talk about it. I'm concerned about any interference in our elections, but I don't like it being used as a prop to attack the president. We need to continue down that.
Okay, but do we have a problem if we can't acknowledge that the Russians did this to benefit Donald Trump? That seems to be the sticking point here.
Well, I don't think that's the sticking point. I think the sticking point is nobody wants it.
Do you believe the Russians did this to help Donald Trump?
I think the Russians interfered in our elections. I think they've interfered in our elections before the 2016 election, and I think they continue to do it. I think the nexus of what happened here is different mediums and different ways that this occurred. We are always going to have foreign powers that are attempting to do this, and we need to do everything we can to protect our elections from all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Let me ask you this. Do you have more confidence that Robert Mueller investigation was fair after going through this process?
No, I don't, and the reason is and that's why my line of questioning, you know, and Robert Mueller testified today that he had different lawyers working on different things, and this isn't about political affiliation. I want to make that perfectly clear. Political affiliation is not the issue.
But there is we're getting to a point in this town where you're guilty until proven innocent, just because on somebody you might have associated with in politics.
Well, no, but when you are a lawyer involved in a DOJ issue, this isn't, like I said, this is not about political affiliation. This is about direct conflict of interest. And when you have over half of your legal team that has a direct political, personal, or professional relationship with the opponent of the person you are investigating, that's not about whether they're a Democrat or a Republican. That's about whether they should have disclosed that conflict of interest and whether Bob Mueller should have vetted his team more before he embarked on the most significant investigation in a generation.
Congressman Armstrong, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for coming on and sharing your views. I would say the reason we know these political affiliations is because it was disclosed.
Well, they're reportable contributions.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Congressman Kelly Armstrong, one of the new Republicans from North Dakota, thanks for coming on and sharing your views. Much